Hello and welcome to the Fulhamish YouTube channel. My name is Don Betts, and on today's video we're looking ahead to Saturday evening's clash at home against Manchester City. And joining me on the channel to look ahead to it is Buvey. You probably recognise him from the kickoff with True Geordie, Lawrence McKenna, Roy Jennings and all that lot. How are you doing, Buvey, today?
Good, mate. Yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, you guys had a great win last night. As I was mentioning before, I was quite happy you had that Southampton game in between our game and the derby. I didn't want to be the first game back after Manchester City loss after 22 games being won in a row. But if we look at Manchester City, the reverse fixture, it wasn't the same Manchester City side, I guess you can say. You weren't sort of searing away at the top of the league. Are you surprised how far ahead you are at this stage, or early on the season, did you always think that this sort of run was sort of in the offing?
Yeah, I think we've always had the capacity to win maybe 12, 13 wins in a row. We've done that before multiple times, but obviously to get to 21 wins, I think on our day we could have beaten United as well. I don't think it was an outstanding Man United performance, and we could be on talking 22, 23 kind of territory as well. So we are outstanding. There's no question about it. I think it all just came very late. I think that's what surprised most people. I think if you start the Premier League and you're top of the Premier League for the first few weeks, and then suddenly you see, oh, of course City are going to win it. But ultimately, Man United had 3 weeks at the top. Spurs had 4 weeks at the top. From my recollection, Leicester City, Liverpool, all had moments at the top. And we've been the most consistent team, and we are the best team in the country, deservedly so because of that.
Are you surprised how lack of a challenge you've had from other teams? You've got United losing points to the likes of West Brom, Crystal Palace. Liverpool have lost 6 home games in a row now at Anfield. Tottenham under Mourinho have only just started again to really start picking up wins, really. Are you surprised how everyone else just didn't seem to react to your guys' run?
It doesn't surprise me because ultimately I know how lucky we are to have the squad that we've got. I think the big one would be Liverpool. Of course, Liverpool have had some injuries, but if you look at some of the starting lineups that have played against, even obviously you guys beat them last weekend, that was an incredible result for you. The Liverpool one shocks me because ultimately we're talking about supposedly the best team England's ever seen, or one of the best teams. Liverpool fans will try and convince you that it's the best side ever seen in Premier League history, even though they got 99 points and not 100. And ultimately, City have got the squad to compete with that. United don't have the manager, in my opinion. Chelsea didn't have the manager at the start of the season. They had I think they had the playing staff to get close to us. They didn't have the manager, and I think they do now, actually, with Tuchel. Spurs, I don't think you can get anywhere near City with the centre-backs they've got, in my opinion. Maybe the rest of the squad's good enough. And then you think of Leicester and Everton that you didn't really expect to be pushing too far anyway. So, yeah, we're very lucky at City. Of course we are in terms of the squad we've got. But then actually, if you just look at the way we play football, even if you take out the bench that we've got, the bench costs hundreds of millions of pounds, let alone the starting 11. Just the way we play football, I don't think anyone can compete as well. I don't think any other side around us are sort of coached to the same ability. And you look at some of the players that have improved: Diaz, Cancelo, Gundogan. They've all improved within a season. And that's just down to good coaching.
What do you think's different about this Manchester City side to previous title-winning sides we've seen under Pep? Obviously, the first two, there was a bit more of a spine, I guess you can say. You had Vincent Kompany at the back, you had David Silva in midfield, and Sergio Aguero up front. What do you think's different this time? Do you think the sort of rebuild has finally come to the fore? Obviously, last season you dropped off behind Liverpool to a considerable amount. Do you think this is a different side? And as I said, what do you think is different about this one to previous Manchester City teams we've seen?
Well, yeah, you're completely right in terms of not relying on the individuals, in terms of Kompany and Yaya Toure. I actually think football's got to the point now where you can't really rely on some of these players, because I think so many teams play very strong football, very possession-based football. You actually need just the best system, and ultimately the reason we won all the games we did, and ironically the reason we lost that game to United, is because we reverted away from a system that is far more balanced than it used to be. There are multiple players over 10 goals scored this season. You think of Mahrez, Foden, Gundogan, all above Jesus, all above 10 goals scored in all competitions. So the goals are being spread around. We're seeing a side basically top of the Premier League, one of the best sides I've seen in terms of how we play football, for again, one of the best sides in Premier League history, in my opinion, for how we play the game. Without a striker, really. Jesus has been in and out, and obviously Aguero not at all really been featured. So for me, it's impressive in that regard, because we're not playing a striker. It's probably never been seen before in Premier League history to win a Premier League without a recognised sort of player that you don't know who's going to play down the middle. I mean, De Bruyne played down the middle against Southampton, arguably, even though Foden had time down the middle. Aguero came on. The reason it's so impressive is it could be the first impressive sort of Premier League title win without a recognised striker, and that's probably what's so impressive about it, mate. Yeah,
I mean, I always thought that maybe it's probably not, but it always feels like Pep could have this thing over every other manager that, well, I was able to win the Premier League without even playing a recognised number 9 up top. But do you think you're a better side without having like a Jesus up top? And do you think De Bruyne, for example, is better being in that front three as opposed to dropping into like a number 8 role in a midfield three?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you, mate, in terms of that point. I do think De Bruyne now, look, there's been times where under Guardiola, he's actually played quite deep and he's allowed David Silva to go on. But David Silva isn't at the club anymore. I think he does genuinely get in the way of Gundogan's performance. And I think Bernardo Silva offers a lot more in and around the midfield in terms of energy. And that's not to discredit De Bruyne, because De Bruyne's got the 1 in a million pass on him. But it's a bit like an NFL where, that quarterback who's got to deliver that incredible ball. He needs time to do it. And De Bruyne, a bit like David Beckham almost, you need that 2 seconds longer on the ball to whip it in, or whip a 60-yard cross in, or whatever it is, from all these crazy angles. And it does slow the game down. We were slow against United. We weren't able to create any chances, meaningful chances. So for me, I'd have to say, yeah, I think De Bruyne now, for me, you have to play him down the middle, false 9. He did it against Real Madrid. It was a very famous victory at the Bernabeu, one of the only English victories away at the Bernabeu in the Champions League in history. And we were fantastic that night. Jesus on the left, actually. I know we're playing Fulham, but if you do look at the Champions League, I think you got to look at De Bruyne down the middle, and it could be a good opportunity to test that further against you boys.
Yeah, and obviously we've spoken about sort of your attacking options. We moved to the back. Obviously, do you think it is simply the signing of Ruben Diaz which has changed it all, or do you think he's brought levels out of players you weren't getting levels out before? Big example, John Stones. We haven't seen this John Stones before. We know the potential's been there. We've seen it during his time, even when he's in the Championship or League One, under Barnsley, when he was at Everton. Do you think it's the signing of Ruben Diaz which has sort of brought different levels at the likes of him, the likes of Cancelo, Zinchenko, even these players that, we know they're good players, but they weren't necessarily performing to the highest levels in previous seasons?
Yeah, I think, look, firstly, you have to say Diaz has come in and been exceptional. And it's hard to sort of engage as a football fan doing this podcast in terms of how much Diaz has influenced Stones. Because ultimately, I have seen Stones being a fantastic defender for City. I've seen him clear a ball off the line that was 0.16 millimeters close to Liverpool scoring an equaliser, and they would have won the Premier League that season. He's an unbelievable player. Guardiola said it from the first season he was at the club that he was one of the most talented players he's ever worked with. I've seen it week in, week out with John Stones. It's just the injuries, and people, I think it's the classic English media bias, where it's like, oh, John Stones is bottling it, he falls over himself, and they want to build him up to set him up to fail. I've seen John Stones been superb 2 years ago. He hasn't done it as consistently because of injuries, and he always picks up a knock. This version of John Stones we're seeing now is a little bit leaner, I'd say. I think he's probably lost a little bit of weight. Maybe that has a little bit of an impact on his joints. I'm not a doctor, obviously, but from what I can see as someone who watches City week in, week out, he looks a little bit more physically rugged. He can go into a challenge. You're always afraid he was a bit brittle as a centre-back, John Stones. And this season, even if you just look at the injury record, he's barely been out injured. That's the biggest factor, because I've actually seen him be class. And in regards to Zinchenko, he won the Premier League with 98 points at left back. He's a Premier League champion left back, so he's always been a good player for us. So it's just about, sometimes you can't always arrive at the top level, can you, as a City player, because we go week in, week out, 4 competitions, we get deep every single season. These guys get tired, just like Liverpool are. And so I'm not too surprised. Long story short.
So, and if we talk about sort of Ruben Diaz specifically, what qualities do you think he has? Obviously, we know the ability to be a world-class defender is there, but what if you can pinpoint sort of certain characteristics or certain abilities, what do you think he's brought to this Man City team that sort of changed it at the back so massively and so obvious to, let's say, an outside fan?
Yeah, I think he brings in a ruthlessness. I think if you can be guilty if you play for Guardiola of worrying, once you've won the ball back, I've got to keep possession, and he's not afraid to lump it. He's not afraid to put a foot in. He's not afraid to put his head in. It's a John Terry kind of level player, in my opinion, in terms of defensive output. Obviously, remains to be seen if he'll be as good as John Terry, but in terms of how John Terry wasn't afraid to put his body on the line, and then ultimately when he did bring the ball out, John Terry, he was superb on the ball as well, completely unnoticed in that regard. Obviously, you won't enjoy hearing that as a Fulham fan, but he's a world class defender on his day, John Terry, and I think Ruben Diaz will turn into that. It's just balance, isn't it? It's just balance. At the end of the day, if you look, Ruben Diaz is shouting at people, he's telling people to get in line, and he's bossing people at the age of 23. He's a captain, but I'm not following this guy into battle if he's rubbish. If he's a bit like Harry Maguire, he's a bit, I think he's not the best defender in the world, and you see Rashford calling him out, calling him a dickhead or whatever. You're not going to call Ruben Diaz a dickhead because he actually the proof's in the pudding with how he performs first, and then he's a leader second. So we've got two characteristics there where he's just a fantastic defender, and then he has leadership qualities that we haven't seen in the club since company.
If we look at the reverse fixture, which was back in December, early December, I think it was the first game sort of after that month-long lockdown. Because I think it was the first day back at the pubs where the substantial meal rule was being brought in. I think it might have been the 12:30 kickoff or something. But that was obviously a 2-0 victory. One was a penalty where, from our perspective, we thought it was a bit dubious. But I think that game that was when we were sort of getting into better performances. Weren't necessarily getting the win, but we were seeing an upturn in our performances, definitely. And we saw the improvement in our defence. Do you think when it with Man City in this game, if we're looking at the reverse fixture, like you did in that game, for you guys to feel comfortable in this game and you don't have another slipper like you did in the derby, is you guys are going to have to be looking at an early goal here? Because the longer Fulham sort of shut Manchester City, I know you guys have so much attacking quality, but I think apart from you guys, we're up there with you guys in regard to best defence in the league in the last sort of 10, 15 games or so. So is an early goal, do you think, something that Pep's going to look at in this game to sort of replicate the sort of comfortable victory you had in a reverse fixture?
Yeah, I don't know if he'll go out and say, look, you need to score in the first 10 minutes to sort of validate the performance. It could take a lot longer than that. I think Fulham have been absolutely class in recent weeks. I think I'd rather be a Fulham fan than a Newcastle fan or even a Brighton fan because of the momentum that you guys have got. It's just about keeping the ball. I think against United, we didn't keep the ball well enough. We got play broken up far too often for my liking. I don't think Fulham will set up in the same way. I don't know if you're going to a back five. I know you've been playing sort of 4-4-2 or 4-5-1 in recent games. I don't know if you'll be able to do that against us. If you do, that's where the spaces will probably come in, because 2 banks of 4 probably isn't enough against City, in all honesty. It's just about keeping the ball and having serious moments on goal and not falling into the things that you can label at City when we aren't at our best, saying stuff like we pass it sideways, we're a bit too slow on it. I want to see first time touches, shots from outside the box, and just rattle Fulham as soon as possible, because obviously Fulham, you've got nothing to lose. It's not a game that you're going to be looking at to win. You're going to be looking at the other sides around you to win, to get out of relegation. So we've got to knock the confidence out of you as soon as possible.
Yeah, if we're looking at how United, you spoke about, obviously it wasn't just United playing well, it was you guys having quite a poor performance in that regard. And see, they got the early goal of the penalty after a minute, and it was a silly mistake from Gabriel Jesus for that tackle on Rashford. But what do you think Fulham can take from Manchester United if we are going to get a result against you guys at the Cottage on Saturday?
What I'd say is that I don't know enough. I probably don't watch enough Fulham in terms of your midfield. I think the midfield is, look, the centre back's always going to be exposed against Man City, and we did expose. Well, that's a tough one actually. It's about how you protect your centre backs. I don't know enough about. Well, I'm guessing it'll be Lamina in midfield.
You'd imagine it the same. It will be Harrison Reed and Lamina. And then it really depends. But I can see, as you mentioned before, it's going back to more of a back five in defence and a back four in attack, which is what we've seen in previous times. But yeah, the midfield too, I'd hope for would be someone like Reed and Lamina, because I do think against the bigger sides, that's a better system to go with, because you've got 2 guys who are used to sort of sitting a bit deeper, I guess you can say. And then someone like Anguissa, who is a wonderful player, but I think is more suited to playing against, for example, in our next game following this is Leeds United away. And I think he's more suited in a game like that, where he is going to be driving through the midfield. But yeah, you'd imagine it would be Harrison Reed and Lamina. Do you think it is the midfield is going to be vitally important for us for getting the balls out to attacking players quickly when we do have the ball. The likes of Lookman, the likes of Josh Maja, the likes of Bobby Reid.
Yeah, I think Bobby Reid's the big one there, isn't he? Because I know he probably doesn't score as many as he'd like. He's probably not even playing in the position that he'd want to play, Bobby Reid. But he does a job for the club, doesn't he? And he runs up and down that pitch. He works tirelessly. He must have the biggest sort of running contribution of any Fulham player, surely, week in, week out, Bobby Reid. And he's a good example of, look, I don't think he's got the quality to be I don't think he's a top level Premier League player, with all due respect, but he epitomises what Fulham are all about, right? And that's the work ethic, that's from the underdog mentality. If you get him in and around the likes of Zinchenko, Rodri, nipping at players' heels, winning the ball up as high as they can, and then you obviously got Maja, Cavallero, whoever starts up front, Lookman as well, all very quick players. That's how you're going to damage us. But obviously, it remains to be seen if you can really get close to City in terms of us keeping the ball. Southampton did a good job scoring a couple of goals. Obviously, one of them doesn't count, in my opinion, for diving. But ultimately, you can score against City. There's no question about it. It's just about how good are you at the back.
Yeah, and I think that's a weird thing with Fulham this season is it's the first time I remember Fulham having a good defence in about a decade. Like, it's the first time I remember us going into a game and going into a lead, for example, against Liverpool. And like, I wasn't that nervous in that Liverpool game that we were going to concede, because I've got so much confidence in the defence. And one player in that defence is obviously Tosin Adarabioyo, who obviously just goes by Tosin now, but he obviously came from you guys. And then he joined just in a permanent move in the summer after a few loan moves at clubs like West Brom and Blackburn. Were Man City fans quite disappointed in his departure, especially for how small the fee was for his transfer as well?
No, look, at the end of the day, if he's good enough, he's good enough, and he wasn't good enough at City. It's as simple as that. You can usually tell. He's probably a Premier League defender. He's got a lot of potential, there's no question about it. But ultimately, he wouldn't even got a minute this season. He wouldn't have got even a minute. You think of Taylor Harwood-Bellis, who arguably, many fans would have said he's a little bit higher up the sort of potential ranking than Tosin was, and he's been loaned out to Blackburn. Played a few minutes in the League Cup. Some of these players just got to let go. Even Jadon is a good example. We've got so much talent. What is Sancho going to do? Overtake Sterling, Mahrez, Sane, Bernardo Silva? You just can't. You're not going to get game time. So I'm glad he seemed like a really nice character, and the fans definitely respected him as a sort of youth talent. But he's at a really good club in Fulham, and I think you'll be in the Premier League next season with him.
Yeah, he's been. I think it's more when it comes to his partnership with Anderson, which has been sublime. And I was talking about it with a couple of my mates this morning. Like, Anderson, he's like, it's so weird. It's like a player. I can't remember a mistake he's made this season. It's crazy. And defensively, it's if we're on our game, it's where we are actually strongest in this team. It is just about taking our chances, and Manchester United against you in the derby did that. So I think it is all about us. Would you say it is about, in this game, us being strong from the back, and we know our quality is there. It is just because, as you said, we will get chances against Man City. It is just about taking them.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there's a good chance you might get a goal. I think you showed a lot of bravery at Anfield. Obviously, it was one of the most historic nights or evenings of your recent times at Fulham. There's no question about it. It's a massive result in your relegation sort of fight. I just look at City. I think Guardiola will be looking at the fact that if we win 6 games, it could be even less than that. If we win 5, even 4 games, depending on other results, we've got another Premier League title, and it's business mode now. I think United was a nice wake-up call. It's a shame against United. It could have easily been a wake-up call against Wolves the week before. Could have been a wake-up call against Southampton. Nearly was because of the referees. Thankfully, it wasn't. Fulham, I think, have probably arrived a little bit too late and probably missed the blip, in my opinion. I might be proven wrong. Who knows? But I saw a lot of really good signs against Southampton. A lot of sort of signs that we've recovered from United really well. Like, you put 5 past any Premier League side at any level, it's always an unbelievable result. It's as simple as that. And Fulham might have arrived to play City maybe a little bit too late now.
Yeah. Do you think Pep will have any eyes on the Champions League game, obviously against Gladbach in the second leg, in regard to team selection ahead of this game?
Do you know what? We've basically got a fully fit squad. There's no major injuries. Even Nathan Ake's back. So from that regard, I couldn't even tell you who's going to start in that regard, because on one hand, the Premier League, you play your 2 starting centre backs, you play Cancelo, you play you play that front six, but ultimately he could see Fulham's opportunity to give Mendy time, Ake time. Laporte is basically third choice now, which is crazy. Give him more time. Aguero could start against Fulham. So actually, despite that sounding like a second string team, it's obviously still an unbelievable amount of quality in there. Gladbach, unfortunately for you lot, is we're 2-0 up in that. So we can kind of rest. We don't have to worry about that as much as we would have, thankfully. And as a result of that, you may see a very strong lineup against Fulham just to get us closer to winning the Premier League and not having any hurdles in the way of that.
Yeah, the way I've looked at it, this Man City game is probably one of the only games for the rest of the season now where we're as fans going into it expecting that we can get a result. I mean, even away to Chelsea and away to United. I mean, United's home record isn't great. Chelsea team, I know they're looking very good under Thomas Tuchel, but it's a South West 6 derby. Anything can really happen there. But yeah, I think it's the last game where we're going into where most Fulham fans are expecting not to get anything. But who knows? Obviously, we did see you drop points against not a subpar Man United team, but it's not like a well-beaten Man United team who are on the same level as you guys as the Premier League table shows. But for one last question, I can push you for a score prediction, Buvey. What are you going to go with for the game?
I'd have to be realistic and say something like a 3-0. I just think we're going to be bang at it. Look, I don't know if that confidence extends to the Champions League further down the line, but I think we've got a very, very strong record against Fulham. I'm hoping for no Kamara kind of comebacks under Roy Hodgson, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd have to say something like a 3-0, maybe a 3-1. I do feel quite confident.
Yeah, as I said, it's one of those games. I don't ever believe in free hits in the Premier League, but it is probably the only game in this season we're not expected to get a result in. But that doesn't mean we should be approaching the game any differently. We although the win against Anfield, we are in a relegation battle here, and I think and we are still in the bottom three. I think that's something people need to get. We are doing well. We've turned a corner. We are getting the wins, but we still are in that bottom three. But games are upcoming away to Ellen Road. We take on Aston Villa at Villa Park. We seem to be a better team away from home, and Villa don't seem to be the same side they are now. So I think this game it's going to be interesting to see how we fare against obviously the best team in the league at the moment and probably the best team in Europe if we're looking at how Bayern are faring in the Bundesliga this season. So yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting game. But Boo, thanks very much for coming on the channel and the podcast.
Yeah, cheers. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, it's been a great chat. Obviously, make sure to check Buvey's channel. I'll leave the link to that in the description. Make sure to follow him on Twitter as well. All links will be in the description box of this YouTube video. But this has been the Fulhamish YouTube channel, looking ahead to Manchester City, travelling to Craven Cottage on Saturday evening, 8 o'clock kickoff. Make sure you're watching. You Whites.